Before Jack the Ripper haunted the streets of London, another predator lurked in the shadows, not in Europe, but in America. In 1880's Austin, Texas, a city on the edge of modern progress, terror struck without warning. A mysterious figure crept through the night, leaving behind a trail of savagery and fear. Newspapers gave him a chilling name, the Servant Girl Annihilator. Some called him America's first serial killer. Who was he? Why did he kill? And why was he never caught? Tonight, we uncover the story of the monster who turned a quiet southern town into a place of dread. The year was 1884. Austin, Texas was still very much a frontier town, but it was also beginning to transform into something more. The population had grown to nearly 20,000 people, and with that growth came the promise of prosperity. Gas lamps lit the streets, the state capitol was under construction, and the city was positioning itself as a proud symbol of progress in the American South. But beneath the surface, Austin was a city of contrasts. Wealthy families occupied grand homes, while poor black families and recently freed servants worked long hours in modest dwellings. Most of these servants were young women, often sleeping in small shacks behind the houses of their employers. They were vulnerable, often alone at night, and largely overlooked by the upper classes. In this fragile environment, where the old world met the new, fear was about to take root. Before long, the city that boasted of its refinement would become infamous for something darker. A string of murders so brutal and mysterious that they would shake the very foundations of this proud southern town. What began as whispers in the servant quarters would soon become a nightmare for everyone. The terror began in December of 1884. The first known victim was Molly Smith, a 25-year-old servant who lived in a small room behind her employer's home. On the night of December 30th, Molly was attacked in her sleep. Dragged from her bed and into the yard, she was brutally beaten and murdered with an axe. Her body was left in the open, a horrific display that stunned her neighbors. The killings did not stop with Molly Smith. On May 7, 1885, another servant, a black cook named Eliza Shelley, was discovered murdered. Her head had been nearly split in two with an axe, a brutal signature that was becoming all too familiar. Just 2 weeks later, on May 23rd, the killer struck again. This time, the victim was Irene Cross, another servant. She was stabbed repeatedly with a knife and scalped so viciously that her injuries horrified even the most hardened townspeople. It was around this time that the killer earned his infamous nickname. In a letter to a friend, the short story writer O. Henry described Austin's grim reality. Town is fearfully dull, except for the frequent raids of the Servant Girl Annihilators, who make things lively during the dead hours of the night. With that, the shadow haunting Austin had a name, the Servant Girl Annihilator, but the name was misleading. Soon, his victims no longer fit the pattern of servant girls. On August 30th, 1885, his target was just a child. 11-year-old Mary Ramey was dragged outside, assaulted, and stabbed through the ear in an act of cruelty almost beyond imagination. A month later, on September 28th, the Annihilator claimed 2 more lives, this time a young couple. Gracie Vance and her sweetheart, Orange Washington, were found brutally beaten. Gracie's body, according to the Austin Daily Statesman, was almost beaten into a jelly. The murders had gone from terrifying to incomprehensible. No one was safe, not servants, not children, not even young lovers. The phantom stalking Austin's nights was escalating, and the city was running out of hope. As the body count began to rise, whispers spread across the city. Whoever was behind these attacks wasn't striking just once, he was hunting. And the realization was chilling. Austin was facing something no American city had seen before, a serial killer. By the spring of 1885, it was clear that Austin was not dealing with random violence. The attacks followed a grim and deliberate pattern. Always at night, always sudden, and always with an almost unthinkable level of cruelty. The killer's weapon of choice seemed to be the axe, an ordinary household tool. But in his hands, it became an instrument of horror. Victims were dragged from their beds into the dirt outside. their screams piercing the silence of the night until they were abruptly cut off. The brutality escalated with each killing. Some women were bludgeoned so viciously that their faces were unrecognizable. Others were stabbed repeatedly with sharpened objects. And in several cases, there were strange, ritual-like elements. The victims were left half-nude, positioned in unusual ways, or mutilated in ways that shocked even hardened police officers. The randomness of the crimes made the city feel like a tinderbox. No neighborhood felt safe. Poor families, servants, and even respectable households armed themselves with pistols and shotguns. Men volunteered to stand guard through the night. But despite these efforts, the killings continued. Month after month, the mysterious figure struck again and again, and with every victim, the fear only grew. People began to whisper that the devil himself had come to Austin. By the summer of 1885, no one in Austin felt safe. Servants refused to sleep in their quarters alone. Families barred their doors and windows, keeping lamps burning through the night. Even the wealthiest households, once untouchable, now trembled at the thought of the killer lurking outside. The press reflected the deep social divides of the time. For months, when the victims were mostly poor black women working as domestic servants, the crimes received little sympathy from Austin's elite. Some editorials treated the murders as little more than grim curiosities, tragedies that happened to people society overlooked. Christmas Eve of 1885 should have been a night of celebration in Austin. Instead, it became the darkest moment in the city's history. That night, two women from respected white families were murdered within hours of each other. Crimes so shocking that they sent Austin into complete hysteria. The first was Susan Hancock, a 41-year-old wife and mother. She was attacked in her own yard while decorating her Christmas tree. The killer struck with an axe, fracturing her skull so brutally that her brain was exposed. Her husband, sleeping inside the house, never heard a sound until it was too late. Only a few hours later, the killer struck again. His second victim was 17-year-old Eula Phillips, a young mother from another prominent family. Eula was found half naked in the backyard of her home, her skull shattered and her body mutilated in ways so grotesque that newspapers at the time struggled to describe them. The timing of the attacks, on Christmas Eve, against women of privilege, shook Austin's elite to its core. The sense of safety that the city's wealthiest citizens had clung to evaporated overnight. Now, no one was safe. Not servants, not wives, not daughters. Panic spread like wildfire. Armed patrols roamed the streets, husbands stood guard with shotguns, and rumors of mobs hunting the killer filled the papers. For the first time, Austin's high society demanded action, and the police, already overwhelmed, came under enormous pressure to capture whoever was responsible. But there was one chilling reality. The Servant Girl Annihilator had once again vanished into the night, leaving behind only terror and blood. The murders of Susan Hancock and Eula Phillips threw Austin's police force into chaos. In truth, they had been struggling for months. The city was ill-prepared for crimes of this scale. In 1885, Austin had no formal detective unit, no forensic science, and little experience dealing with serial violence. Officers relied mostly on witness statements, hunches, and brute force. Under immense pressure from the public, the police cast a wide net. Dozens of suspects were arrested. Husbands of the victims, jealous lovers, drifters, and even strangers passing through town were all accused at one point or another. Some men were beaten until they confessed, only to later be proven innocent. One of the strangest suspects was a Malaysian cook named Maurice, who worked at the Pearl House Hotel. Newspapers played up his foreignness, feeding public paranoia. Another theory suggested a band of criminals rather than a single killer. Yet none of these accusations held up. The evidence was weak, often circumstantial, and the real killer remained free. Eula Phillips' case. Suspicion fell on her own husband, James Phillips. He was put on trial for her murder, accused of killing her in a jealous rage. Though he was convicted at first, the verdict was eventually overturned. Still, the trial shifted attention away from the possibility of a serial killer, leaving the case muddled in doubt and controversy. Month after month, the murders stopped as suddenly as they had begun. But the investigation left behind more questions than answers. Who had carried out these brutal attacks? Was it one man or many? And perhaps the most haunting question of all, why did he disappear just when the city was at its breaking point? With the killings unresolved, speculation took on a life of its own. To some, the Servant Girl Annihilator was not just a man, but a phantom, a shadow who slipped through locked doors and vanished without a trace. Others believed he was someone hiding in plain sight, a neighbor or a servant, walking among the very people he terrified. One theory that has endured through the years is that the Annihilator didn't simply stop, he moved. Only 3 years after the Austin murders ended, London was gripped by its own nightmare, the infamous Jack the Ripper. The similarities, the targeting of women, the nighttime attacks, the brutality, led some to wonder if America's first serial killer had crossed the ocean and resurfaced in Whitechapel. Of course, this idea has its skeptics. The victims in Austin were struck with axes and blunt objects, while Jack the Ripper used knives with surgical precision. Still, the timing and the sheer mystery of both cases keep the theory alive in popular imagination. Other theories pointed closer to home. Some blamed local men with histories of violence, though no evidence ever tied them directly to the crimes. Others believed the attacks could have been the work of more than one killer, acting independently or in a loose group, which might explain the erratic pattern of the murders. In the absence of answers, every rumor became a possibility. The Servant Girl Annihilator became less a man than a legend, a figure who embodied fear itself. And with no resolution, Austin was left to wonder, did their killer die, flee, or simply choose to stop? Today, the story of the Servant Girl Annihilator lingers as one of America's earliest encounters with the idea of a serial killer. Long before the term even existed, Austin in the 1880s became a living example of how one predator could paralyze an entire city with fear. The case also exposed deep fractures in society. For months, the murders of black servant women were treated with indifference by the press and the elite. Only when the killings reached the city's white families did the crimes truly become a matter of urgency. That grim reality reveals as much about the prejudices of the era as it does about the killer himself. Though no one was ever convicted, the Annihilator's crimes forced Austin and America to confront a new kind of horror. This was not a crime of passion or drunken rage, but something colder, more methodical. It was a pattern of violence that suggested compulsion, calculation, and repetition, the hallmarks of what criminologists would later call serial murder. The murders also left a scar on Austin's identity. Even as the city grew into the bustling capital we know today, this dark chapter remained hidden in the background, half forgotten, almost erased from polite conversation. Yet historians and true crime enthusiasts continue to dig into the case, searching for answers that have eluded investigators for more than a century. The Servant Girl Annihilator may never have been caught, but his legacy remains. A chilling reminder that America's first serial killer walked the streets of Austin unseen and then disappeared into history. The murders stopped as suddenly as they began, leaving behind more questions than answers. Was the Servant Girl Annihilator ever identified? Did he die quietly, hidden among the very community he terrorized? Or did he cross the ocean, re-emerging in London as the monster the world would come to know as Jack the Ripper? We may never know. What is certain is that Austin, Texas, once a city full of hope and promise, became the stage for one of the most terrifying crime sprees in American history. A killer who walked through the night, unseen, uncatchable, and unforgettable. Please like and subscribe if you found this video enjoyable. Let us know what you think in the comments. Thanks for watching.